Light that spark, Fire Nation. JLD here, and welcome to Entrepreneurs on Fire, the only daily show interviewing the world's top entrepreneurs 7 days a week. Today, we'll be breaking down escaping toxic workplaces, the courage to leave. To drop these value bombs, I brought to Jeff Davis into EO Fire Studios. Jeff is an award-winning author, blogger, speaker, mental health advocate, and consultant. He has delivered keynotes worldwide and is a sought-after expert in authentic leadership, resiliency, and workplace dynamics. And today, Fire Nation will talk about how he defeated a corrupt multi-billion-dollar company, some experiences from people who worked at Google, Meta, Boeing, and Intel that was a little toxic, and also mental resilience and oh so much more. And a big thank you for sponsoring today's episode goes to Jeff and our sponsors. Fire Nation, this is your year to get unstuck and to grow a successful business. Attend the world's highest rated business growth workshop taught personally by Clay Clark and now featuring football star Tim Tebow and President Trump's son, Eric Trump, at thrivetimeshow.com/EOFire. Again, request life-changing tickets today at thrivetimeshow.com/EOFire. Jeff, say what's up to Fire Nation and share something that you believe about becoming successful that most people disagree with.
What's up, John and Fire Nation? Absolute pleasure to be here. One thing that comes to mind that a lot of people disagree with is that in my experience and research, being kind is one of the keys to becoming very successful. And I can tell you very sincerely that I've been crucified, and I'm not using that word lightly, in both workplaces and other environments. You know, people telling me kindness means you're weak, kindness means you don't get it. And here's what I have to say. Being kind, it comes from emotional intelligence, it comes from personal growth, and it also comes from realizing that a lot of people are struggling. So kindness is power.
Fire Nation is right on theme with our episode today, which is all about escaping toxic workplaces, the courage to leave. And Jeff, I want to talk about some of your craziest workplace experiences. And there's also a story of how you defeated a corrupt multi-billion-dollar company. So take it away.
Yes, let's jump right in. So very quickly, I'm going to set the table with some context in that over my career, I've done both simultaneously. I've been this writer and professional speaker, and I've been this contractor, consultant, and employee. They've both complemented one another. So let's go to this bonfire company event I had in New York. A lot of the colleagues from the New York office was there. I came from my home state, the Connecticut office, and I tried to be friendly, which is what the event was supposed to be. And I got met with rudeness, and I can own my part of it and say I did not react appropriately. I dropped the F-bomb, and it escalated in absurd ways from there. My colleague, he took out a knife, charged me, tried to slit my throat. Thankfully, I had people who held him back. I also had people who blocked me. If it wasn't for that, I might not be here. Very intense. That was only the beginning. That was only the tip of the iceberg. I encountered a corrupt CEO in my home state of Connecticut who I stood up to. I had another experience, a contract experience in Times Square, New York City, which on the surface seemed like an iconic role. I had to walk out on the spot because it was so incredibly toxic. Now that sets the table with some context for what happened when I was overseas. So late 2017, I moved to the Netherlands, and I'm thinking, great, I'm leaving all of that toxic insanity behind in Connecticut, New York. And without exaggeration, I can tell you it was 10 times worse in the Netherlands. So I had this one role where I was working in downtown Rotterdam, Netherlands at a company called HelloPrint. It was a tech company, and I can honestly say it was the most toxic company I've ever worked for. The CEO loved that I'm this writer and speaker who's crushing it. So he had me speak to the whole company, and I didn't know that it was so toxic, and that created an absurd amount of jealousy. And I'm not just talking about gossip and backstabbing. At this company, at HelloPrint, I experienced sabotage, where they actively sabotaged my projects, and also, of course, tried to say bad things about me to other companies. I did stay on as a consultant, and I did work directly with the CEO to improve that culture and improve profits. So despite the bizarre experience, it actually has a very positive ending, but I will name that as officially the most toxic company I've ever worked for. And that leads us to the corrupt company. It's where I worked at after HelloPrint, also in the Netherlands. And there, the entire ecosystem wasn't toxic, but there were two bad eggs who ruined the whole company for everyone, especially a toxic HR director. And He had been ruining people's lives for years. He was making people very scared. What happened is I went on burnout from this, contract experience. I was contracted with them. They had to keep paying me, and the company just wouldn't have it. They had no empathy. They had no respect. And it wasn't only demands and harassment, but it escalated to the point of threats. And it was, to call it bizarre would be an understatement. I decided to stand up to them. And, I did that by being strategic. Knowledge is power. I learned everything I could about Dutch law, and I realized, oh, I'm in my rights. They're the ones breaking the law. And I involved my lawyers. I crushed them in the legal battle. I spoke up. That's another key. That's another key essential aspect to my winning this huge battle is that I spoke up. I got the HR director fired. And, finally, I kept my cool amidst all of this going on at once. The HR director, he'd been ruining people's lives. One of my colleagues was very close to ending his life because of the bullying from the HR director. Thank God he called me and I was able to talk him off the ledge. And thankfully, he's thriving and doing well today. So the core of this corrupt experience is really it represented abuse that I've experienced over the course of my life. And I do go into that experience in depth, including naming the abuser in the book that is live on Amazon globally as of May 1st, The Courage to Leave, Breaking Free from Toxic Workplaces. And that's where I go into that more in full in terms of how I defeated that corrupt company.
All I have to say is wow. And I mean, that's a capital WOW. I mean, one thing, I was in the military for 8 years. I was an officer in the US Army. I went to Iraq, and I have to be honest, to be a little vulnerable here. If somebody pulls a knife out and goes at another guy, I don't know how active I am in blocking that guy and trying to take down the knife wielder. I'm just going to be honest. Here. So I hope you were appreciative of those people who stepped in, Jeff.
Yes, John, as usual, you nail it. We jumped right onto the same wavelength right away because I actually had a colleague named Chris from Bridgeport, Connecticut, and I'm being completely sincere. He blocked like 5 of the New Yorkers. There are actually several who came out with me, and then there was the one guy with the knife. And because he blocked them, it slowed down the guy with the knife. So yeah, I am eternally grateful for Chris and for the other people who stepped in because, yeah, it could be a much, much worse outcome than what actually transpired.
Now, there's also a couple experiences of people who worked at Google, Meta, Boeing, Intel. I mean, it's not just companies in Rotterdam that are having these issues, obviously. So give us maybe one of those experiences.
Yes, absolutely. So I felt it extremely important to not only share my perspective and experiences, but also the perspective and work experiences of many others. So let's go into one of them. There was actually my dear friend Anya at Meta. And she experienced an incredibly toxic culture while working at Meta, where she was consistently undervalued and dismissed. And it got so bad that, in fact, she ended up becoming suicidal, which is very sad. She was able to bounce back, but that insidiously toxic culture completely destroyed her. And she made such a profound point that I emphasize this when I talk about it, is that she says bullying is not necessarily always overt. Sometimes it's in those subtle, repeated put downs and dismissings and disrespectful situations, and that can eat and wear away at your self-confidence and self-esteem. So I thought that was incredibly eye-opening from Anya and her time at Meta.
So you're a big believer in mental resilience. Let's talk about how we can reclaim our power and decision-making through this mental resilience.
Yes, so this is a topic that I've actually been requested to speak on a lot lately, both to police officers and lawyers. I also gave this to a multi-billion-dollar company, Polestar. So let me share some practical tips here to build the mental resilience. First of all, there's a technique called RAV, and people love this one, and it stands for recognize, acknowledge, validate. And that's when you're having those internal challenges and those internal struggles. And first of all, you recognize it by simply becoming aware of it. And then you acknowledge it. You can either do this out loud, or you can even do it silently internally to yourself. I see you. You're giving yourself that space to feel it. And then you validate it by putting a name to it. For example, it could be like, I feel sad. I feel angry. I'm confused. Maybe it's all of the above. And that's the key there. I will now tie this into some really quick tips on how do you shift into neutral and become more mentally resilient when you're in these completely destructive situations. Well, I just mentioned the RAV technique. Also, you can take life one breath at a time, just slow it down to one breath. There's, of course, meditation, prayer, and reflection. These work a lot for the people that I work with. Calling someone, a friend, a relative, a friendly colleague, a lifeline. I've even used lifelines before and it went incredibly well. Or even just going for a walk outside. And these are incredibly simple yet deceptively powerful, because this is what gives you that mental resilience to then speak up and to advocate for both yourself and others. Because when you're in a more neutralized, solid place in yourself and you've done the inner work, that's when you can really, really make an impact and improve the situation.